What is going on, everyone? This is Philly Jim, and welcome back to another episode of Top 3, where we look at 3 players or events from my team in a certain category. And this category comes from a comment written by Cowboy X Factor asking, what are your top 3 Philly Eagles that you liked? Well, Cowboy X Factor, I am going to tell you. This video will discuss my favorite offensive, defensive, and special teams players from the Eagles since I have been a fan. Before we begin, what are your favorite offensive, defensive, and special teams players for the Eagles or for your own team if you root for someone else? I would love to read them in the comment section below. So let's go ahead and start with the offensive player, and that player is the running back with the most rushing yards in franchise history, and that would be LeSean McCoy, the guy who was nicknamed Shady, not because of how good his juke moves were, but because of his mood swings as a baby. At one moment, he'd be happy. At another moment, he'd be sad and crying. However, the only people who would be crying were the guys that were forced to tackle him. LeSean McCoy was drafted in the second round of the 2009 NFL Draft out of the University of Pittsburgh. LeSean McCoy would not start immediately. However, he would play in reverse for an aging Brian Westbrook, and he did not disappoint as he set the record for the most rushing yards by an Eagles running back in a single season at 637 yards. Miles Sanders eclipsed this record in 2019. In 2011, LeSean McCoy would score the most touchdowns for players that were not quarterbacks at 20 touchdowns. Finally, in 2013, LeSean McCoy would win the rushing title by rushing for 1,607 yards and would be voted onto the All-Pro team as a running back. LeSean McCoy would have a tumultuous ending with the Eagles as he would be traded by head coach Chip Kelly to the Buffalo Bills in exchange for linebacker Kiko Alonso. This would be traumatic for McCoy because he had never played for a single team outside of the state of Pennsylvania. LeSean McCoy would be voted to 6 Pro Bowls and 2 All-Pro teams. In the 2019 season, LeSean McCoy would be signed by the Kansas City Chiefs, and he would win a Super Bowl as a deactivated player. My favorite moment by LeSean McCoy was in the 2013 season, where the Eagles were one of the best offenses in the NFL. The team was 7-5 going into a game against the Detroit Lions. The Eagles needed to win in order to keep up with the Dallas Cowboys in the battle for the NFC East title. The Lions were also 7-5 and were also in position to win their own division or to even get a wild card spot. The biggest obstacle in this game was the fact that there would be a blizzard that started moments before the game started. Nobody could see anything, kickers were missing extra points, and there were a few controversial calls by the officials, especially a touchdown where there is question to whether or not Deshaun Jackson stepped out of bounds or not. I don't know, you can decide for yourself. Anyway, the Eagles were down 14-6 in the fourth quarter, and the game was seemingly out of reach. All of this until LeSean McCoy went off to the races and not only ran for 1 long touchdown, but would also run for 2 long touchdowns. LeSean McCoy would run for a total of 217 rushing yards in this game, breaking the Eagles' single-game record, and thanks to LeSean McCoy and his shifty abilities, the Eagles were able to defeat the Detroit Lions in this game 34-20 in what is now known by many Eagles fans as the Snowball. Us Eagles fans like our defensive players to be tough and have a blue-collar mentality. We want our defenders to leave everything out there on the field and never give up. This would exemplify the leader of the Eagles defense in the early years of when I was a fan. He doesn't need an introduction, even though he would always get one. It would be Hall of Fame safety Brian Dawkins, the man who would be nicknamed Wolverine or Weapon X on the Eagles. Brian Dawkins would be drafted in the 1996 NFL Draft out of the University of Clemson. Dawkins would almost immediately fit in with the team, being a Pro Bowler in 1999, where he would record 4 interceptions and a touchdown. Brian Dawkins would end up being the heart and soul of the Eagles throughout the glory years of the early to mid-2000s. He had some of the greatest pregame speeches for his fellow safeties and defensive backs. He would tell guys that nobody respected them and they had to earn the respect of their opponents to earn that respect. Brian Dawkins would make the Pro Bowl 7 times in his career with the Philadelphia Eagles, and 4 of those years he would be voted to the All-Pro team. So Dawkins truly did have that respect. After the 2008 season, the Eagles would choose to not re-sign the 36-year-old safety. The team would search for his replacement for 6 or so years. but it felt more like a decade. Brian would be signed by the Denver Broncos and would play until 2011 and would retire as a 9-time Pro Bowler. Brian Dawkins would officially retire in 2012 as an Eagle, and he would have his jersey retired in the Eagles Ring of Honor in 2012. And in 2018, Brian Dawkins would officially get his gold jacket and would be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. There are many hard-hitting Brian Dawkins moments that I can think of that would exemplify him as a player, but my favorite was in a mid-season game against the Washington Redskins at Veterans Stadium. The great part about Brian Dawkins was the fact that it didn't matter what the records were, what the scores were, Brian would never pass up the decision to make a guy pay. The Redskins had the ball on 2nd down and 6 inside Eagles territory. In the previous week against the Broncos, Redskins quarterback Tony Banks would suffer a concussion. He would take the snap, roll to the right, run towards the sideline, and who would meet him at the sideline? It was Brian Dawkins coming in like a stampeding rhino and would clock Banks as payment for running out of the pocket. Tony would be okay, and unfortunately the Eagles would lose 13-3, but when the play happened, I'm not going to lie, I celebrated. And finally, the special teams player. Now, with most of these special teams players, a lot of them played on offense and defense. Now, I'm not going to say much about this guy because I know PR wants to use this guy in another countdown. This guy was none other than Brian Westbrook. Now, yes, Brian was an amazing running back with the Eagles, but some of his first moments with the Eagles were game-clinching punt returns. My favorite moment from this former Villanova Wildcat was at the Giants Stadium in Week 7 in 2003, where both the Eagles and the Giants were 2-3. Because Donovan McNabb had a sprained hand that he received in the previous game against the Cowboys, he was only able to muster 64 total passing yards and no touchdowns. The game seemed all but over with 1 minute and 16 seconds left, with the Giants winning 10-7. Jeff Fiegels was the punter and Brian Westbrook was the return man. I could explain what happened, but I think I'll let Eagles radio announcer Merrill Reese narrate it for me.
He gets it away. It's a wobbler. Bounces across the 20. Westbrook takes it. Looks for running room. Up to the 25. The 30. To the 35, 40. 40. Then Westbrook! He's going! He's gone! Touchdown! Brian Westbrook! 84 yards! No penalty flag! I don't believe it! Brian Westbrook! This place is in a state of shock!
Brian Westbrook had effectively saved the Eagles' season in that moment, as the Eagles would take that 3-3 record and would win 8 consecutive games and would end the season 12-4. Also, whenever you can snatch victory out of the hands of the Giants and their fans and look at their devastated faces as they attempt to analyze what happened, that is always a great moment. Thank you for watching this episode of Top 3. Again, if you have a favorite offensive, defensive, or special teams Eagle, or from whatever team you like, please talk about it in the comment section below. Also, if you want me to do a topic on another Top 3 in the future, please comment what category you would like me to do that on in the comment section as well. Thank you again, and have a nice day.